Welcome to Topical Economics. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss any of our insightful videos on key economic concepts. In today's video, we're diving into the topic of market structure. I'll be walking you through some past paper multiple-choice questions, carefully analyzing each one to explain why the correct answer is what it is. Whether you're preparing for exams or just want to strengthen your understanding of economics, this video will help you get to grip with important concepts in a clear and practical way. So, let's get started. Starting with the first question. What is an outcome of a competitive market? A. High prices and low quality. B. Low prices and large choice. C. High profits and low quality. D. Low profits and little choice. The correct answer for this question is option B. Low prices and large choice. In a competitive market, multiple firms or sellers offer similar products or services. This competition drives prices down and often leads to a greater variety of choices for consumers, as businesses try to attract customers with both price and quality options. Moving to second question. What could cause profits to be high in a monopoly market? A. Barriers to entry. B. Diseconomies of scale. C. Elastic demand for the product. D. High number of substitutes for the product. The correct answer for this question is option A. Barriers to entry. In a monopoly market, one firm dominates the entire market because there are significant barriers preventing other firms from entering and competing. These barriers can include things like high startup costs, control of essential resources, government regulations, or patents. With no competition, the monopolist can set prices higher and produce at lower quantities than in a competitive market, which typically results in higher profits. Analyzing the other options. Option B. Diseconomies of scale refers to the inefficiencies that occur when a company becomes too large and its costs of production per unit increase. Diseconomies of scale would tend to decrease profits, not increase them, because the firm becomes less efficient as it expands. Next, option C. Elastic demand for the product. When demand is elastic, consumers are sensitive to price changes. If a monopoly faces elastic demand, they can't raise prices too much without losing a significant number of customers, which could lower profits. Lastly, option D. High number of substitutes for the product. If there are many substitutes, demand becomes more elastic. In this case, the monopolist would not have much pricing power and would likely face pressure to lower prices, reducing profits. Moving to third question. Helium is a gas that is limited in supply because it takes thousands of years to form. The U.S. government holds 35% of the world's supply of helium and has been selling its stocks. Helium is essential in medical scanners. It is also used for party balloons, which is a wasteful alternative use of a valuable good. Which two concepts apply to this statement? A. Demand and supply, government subsidy. B. Excess demand, resource allocation. C. Opportunity cost, private monopoly. D. Public sector, factors of production. The correct answer for this question is option B. The two concepts that apply to this statement are excess demand and resource allocation. The statement explains that helium is a limited resource with important uses, such as in medical scanners, but also points out its wasteful use in party balloons. This imbalance suggests excess demand, where the need for helium in critical applications exceeds the available supply, particularly as helium is scarce and takes thousands of years to form. The resource allocation aspect comes into play because the U.S. government holds a significant portion of the world's helium supply, and how it decides to sell or distribute this helium involves important decisions about how to allocate the resource across different uses, some of which might be less essential or more wasteful. This issue of inefficient resource distribution highlights the need for better management to ensure helium is used where it is most needed. Moving to fourth question. A private sector firm is the only supplier of rail services between two cities. What will stop the firm charging very high ticket prices? A. Barriers to entries into rail services. B. Competition from public road transport. C. Government policy encouraging monopoly power. D. High costs of maintaining rail tracks. The correct answer to this question is option B. The main factor that would stop a private sector firm from charging very high ticket prices for rail services is competition from public road transport, option B. If there are alternative modes of transport available, such as buses, cars, or other public transportation options, passengers have the choice to switch to these alternatives if rail prices become too high. This competition puts pressure on the rail company to keep prices reasonable, as consumers would likely choose more affordable options otherwise. On the other hand, barriers to entry into rail services, option A, could actually help the firm maintain monopoly power by preventing new competitors from entering the market, thus allowing the firm to set higher prices. While government policy encouraging monopoly power, option C, might enable the firm to charge higher prices without fear of competition, it doesn't inherently limit pricing. It would actually have the opposite effect, potentially allowing for higher prices if there is no regulatory oversight. Finally, while high costs of maintaining rail tracks, option D, are a consideration, they do not directly stop the firm from raising prices. In fact, these costs may justify higher prices if the company needs to cover maintenance expenses. Therefore, the presence of competitive alternatives, such as public road transport, is the most significant factor in preventing the firm from charging excessively high prices. Moving to fifth question. Why might a government encourage a monopoly? A. It can compete against foreign firms. B. It can have high average costs. C. It can make excessive profits. D. It can prevent innovation. The correct answer for this question is option A. It can compete against foreign firms. Governments might encourage a monopoly because, in certain industries, having a single, large firm can help the country create a competitive entity that can effectively compete against foreign companies. This is particularly relevant in industries that require significant investment, infrastructure, or economies of scale, where a monopoly might be more efficient and better positioned to take on international competition. By consolidating resources, a government can strengthen its domestic industry and prevent foreign firms from dominating the market. Moving to sixth question. What is found in a competitive market? A. Every firm earns large profits. B. Firms with limited capital can enter the market. C. The costs of production are always lower than in a monopoly. D. There is limited choice for consumers. The correct answer for this question is option B. Firms with limited capital can enter the market. In a competitive market, also known as a perfectly competitive market, there are several key characteristics that allow firms to enter and exit the market freely. One of the main features of a competitive market is low barriers to entry, meaning that firms with limited capital can still enter the market and compete. This contrasts with a monopoly, where high barriers to entry, such as significant startup costs or control over essential resources, restrict the ability of new firms to compete. Analyzing the other options. Option A, every firm earns large profits, is incorrect, because in a competitive market, firms typically earn normal profits in the long run. If firms were earning large profits, new competitors would enter the market, driving prices down and reducing profits for all firms. Next, option C, the costs of production are always lower than in a monopoly, is not always true. While competitive markets tend to drive down costs and prices due to competition, monopolies can also achieve economies of scale and may have lower costs in some cases, especially in industries where large-scale production is efficient. Lastly, option D, there is limited choice for consumers, is incorrect because, in a competitive market, the presence of many firms offering similar but differentiated products typically leads to a wide variety of choices for consumers. Moving to seventh question. Which combination is usually found in a monopoly? And many buyers and many sellers. B. Many buyers and single seller. C. Single buyer and many sellers. D. Single buyer and single seller. The correct answer for this question is option B. Many buyers and single seller. In a monopoly, there is typically one seller, the monopolist, that dominates the market, and many buyers who purchase the product or service offered by that single seller. This gives the monopolist significant control over pricing and supply. Moving to eighth question. How is a government most likely to prevent the growth of monopolies? A. By encouraging mergers in the private sector. B. By establishing nationalized industries. C. By promoting the benefits of economies of scale. D. By reducing barriers to entry into an industry. The correct answer for this question is option D, by reducing barriers to entry into an industry. Monopolies form when a single company dominates a market, often due to high barriers to entry, e.g., high startup costs, strict regulations, or control over essential resources. By reducing these barriers, the government makes it easier for new firms to enter the market and compete with the dominant company, which can help prevent monopolistic behavior. Analyzing the other options. Option A, by encouraging mergers in the private sector, would likely increase the risk of monopolies, as mergers between large firms can reduce competition in a market. Next, option B, by establishing nationalized industries. While nationalization could reduce the potential for private monopolies, it doesn't necessarily promote competition. It could lead to government-run monopolies instead. Lastly, option C, by promoting the benefits of economies of scale. While economies of scale can lead to efficiency in production, they can also make it easier for a firm to dominate the market. Promoting this might inadvertently support larger firms that could become monopolies. Moving to 9th question. In some industries, a monopoly controls output and prices. What is the most likely impact of this on consumers? A. Higher prices. B. Higher profits. C. Higher taxes. D. More choice. The correct answer for this question is option A. Higher prices. In a monopoly, a single company controls the supply of a product or service, which reduces competition. Without competitors to drive prices down, the monopoly can set prices higher than they might be in a competitive market, often leading to higher prices for consumers. Moving to 10th question. What is characteristic of a monopoly market structure? A. A monopolist may determine the price of its product. B. A monopolist's product has many substitutes. C. There are no external costs. D. There is easy entry into the market. The correct answer for this question is option A. A monopolist may determine the price of its product. In a monopoly market structure, a single firm dominates the entire market, meaning it is the sole supplier of the product. As a result, the monopolist has significant control over the price of the product, because there are no direct competitors. Analyzing the other options. Option B. A monopolist's product has many substitutes. In a monopoly, the product typically has no close substitutes, which is why the monopolist has pricing power. If there were many substitutes, the market wouldn't be a monopoly. Next, option C, there are no external costs. Monopolies may still create external costs, like pollution, etc., so this is not a defining characteristic of a monopoly. Lastly, option D, there is easy entry into the market. One of the defining features of a monopoly is high barriers to entry, which prevent other firms from entering the market and competing with the monopolist. Moving to 11th question. Which international market is closest to the model of perfect competition? A. Diamonds. B. Foreign currency. C. Petrol, fuel. D. Washing machines. The correct answer for this question is option B. Foreign currency. Foreign currency markets are generally considered to come close to the characteristics of perfect competition, particularly in the sense that there are many buyers and sellers, the product, currency, is homogeneous, and prices are largely determined by supply and demand dynamics. While there are some regulatory frameworks and central bank interventions, the Forex market operates in a highly competitive environment with high liquidity and low barriers to entry. The other options are less representative of perfect competition. Option A. Diamonds. The diamond market is far from perfect competition due to branding, differentiation, and market power exerted by key players, e.g., De Beers. Next, option C. Petrol, fuel. While fuel markets can be competitive, they are often affected by factors like government regulation, pricing power of large corporations, and global supply chain issues, so they don't fit the perfect competition model perfectly. Lastly, option D. Washing machines. the washing machine market involves significant product differentiation and brand loyalty, and firms often have some degree of pricing power, so it doesn't align with perfect competition. Moving to 12th question. What is correct for firms in perfect competition? A. They achieve economies of scale. B. They are price takers. C. They make use of non-price competition. D. They produce differentiated products. The correct answer for this question is option B. They are price takers. In perfect competition, firms are considered price takers because they have no control over the market price of the product. The price is determined by the overall supply and demand in the market, and individual firms must accept this price when selling their goods. Analyzing the other options. Option A. They achieve economies of scale. While firms in perfect competition can experience economies of scale, the model assumes many small firms that are typically unable to achieve large economies of scale because of the constant entry and exit of firms in the market. Next, option C. They make use of non-price competition. Non-price competition, such as advertising and branding, is not a feature of perfect competition. All firms produce homogeneous products and do not differentiate themselves through marketing or branding. Lastly, option D. They produce differentiated products. In perfect competition, all firms produce identical, homogeneous products, so product differentiation is not present. Moving to 13th question. Which characteristic can exist both in monopoly and in perfect competition? A. Freedom of entry. B. Many buyers. C. Many sellers. D. Perfectly elastic demand curve. The correct answer for this question is option B. The characteristic that can exist both in monopoly and in perfect competition is many buyers. In a monopoly, there is only one seller in the market, but there can still be many buyers. The presence of many buyers is a feature of both market structures. In perfect competition, there are many sellers and many buyers, and no single buyer or seller can influence the market price. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Freedom of entry. In perfect competition, there is freedom of entry, but in a monopoly, barriers to entry prevent new firms from entering the market. Next, option C. Many sellers, is true for perfect competition but not for a monopoly, which has only one seller. Lastly, option D. Perfectly elastic demand curve, is a feature of individual firms in perfect competition, but in a monopoly, the firm faces a downward-sloping demand curve. Moving to 14th question. What is a characteristic of perfect competition? A. Firms sell an identical product. B. New firms cannot enter the market. C. The market is controlled by one firm. D. There is a high degree of market concentration. The correct answer for this question is option A. Firms sell an identical product. In a perfectly competitive market, all firms sell a homogeneous or identical product, meaning consumers do not differentiate between the goods offered by different sellers. This is one of the key characteristics of perfect competition, along with other features such as free entry and exit of firms, many buyers and sellers, and perfect information. Analyzing the other options. Option B. In perfect competition, new firms can freely enter the market. Next, C. A market controlled by one firm describes a monopoly, not perfect competition. Lastly, option D. A high degree of market concentration refers to oligopolies or monopolistic markets, not perfect competition. Moving to 15th question. What is a characteristic of a perfectly competitive firm? A. Absence of competitors. B. Non-price competition. C. One dominant firm. D. Price taker. The correct answer for this question is option D. Price taker. In a perfectly competitive market, firms are price takers, meaning they accept the market price as given. This happens because there are many firms in the market selling identical products, so no single firm has enough market power to influence the price. The other options don't align with perfect competition. Option A. Absence of competitors in perfect competition. There are many competitors. Next, option B. Non-price competition in perfect competition. There is no non-price competition because products are identical, and firms cannot differentiate their goods. Lastly, option C, one dominant firm describes a monopoly or an oligopoly, not perfect competition. Moving to 16th question. Which situation involving the building industry is most likely to be investigated by a government body set up to control restrictive practices? A. A builder purchasing a plot of land for development of housing. B. Groups of suppliers of building material agreeing to fix prices. C. Several builders bidding for the same contracts. D. Several builders using different sources of supply. The correct answer for this question is option B. Groups of suppliers of building material agreeing to fix prices, involves price fixing, which is a classic example of a restrictive practice or anti-competitive behavior. In many countries, colluding to fix prices is illegal because it undermines competition and can lead to consumers paying higher prices than they would in a competitive market. The other options are less likely to involve restrictive practices. Option A, a builder purchasing a plot of land for development is a normal business transaction and doesn't involve anti-competitive behavior. Next, option C, several builders bidding for the same contracts. Competitive bidding is typical in the construction industry and generally encourages lower prices, not anti-competitive behavior, unless there's collusion in the bidding process, which isn't specified here. Lastly, option D, several builders using different sources of supply is a sign of competition, not a restrictive practice. Moving to 17th question. Which statement explains why firms in perfect competition are not able to exploit consumers? A. The firms can restrict output. B. The products are differentiated. C. There are barriers to entry. D. There is perfect information. The correct answer for this question is option D. There is perfect information. In a perfectly competitive market, perfect information means that all consumers and producers have complete and accurate knowledge about prices, products, and available alternatives. This transparency prevents firms from exploiting consumers, because if any firm tries to raise prices above the market level, consumers can easily switch to another seller offering the same product at the competitive price. Analyzing the other options. Option A, the firms can restrict output. In perfect competition, firms cannot restrict output to raise prices. If they try, new firms will enter the market, increasing supply and bringing prices back to the equilibrium level. Next, option B, the products are differentiated. In perfect competition, products are homogeneous, identical, so there is no product differentiation for firms to exploit. Lastly, option C, there are barriers to entry. In perfect competition, there are no barriers to entry, allowing new firms to enter the market freely, which prevents any firm from having the power to exploit consumers. Moving to 18th question. What is not likely in an industry with many small firms? A. High capital costs. B. High level of competition. C. Low barriers to entry. D. Low research expenditure. The correct answer for this question is option A. High capital costs. In an industry with many small firms, high capital costs are typically not likely. Small firms tend to have limited financial resources, so industries with many small firms usually have relatively low capital requirements. High capital costs tend to be a barrier for entry, and would generally discourage the existence of many small firms. Analyzing the other options. Option B, high level of competition. When there are many small firms in an industry, competition tends to be high because each firm competes for market share with others offering similar products or services. Next, option C, low barriers to entry. If there are many small firms, it usually indicates that there are low barriers to entry, meaning that new firms can enter the market without significant obstacles. Lastly, option D, low research expenditure. Small firms often have limited budgets, so their research expenditure might be lower compared to larger firms. However, this is still a common characteristic in industries with many small firms. Moving to 19th question. A monopoly takes over an industry from competitive firms. What is not likely to be true about a monopoly compared with a competitive firm? A. A monopoly will earn a higher rate of profit. B. A monopoly will gain a greater share of the market. C. A monopoly will offer a wider choice to the consumer. D. A monopoly will operate on a larger scale of production. The correct answer for this question is option C. A monopoly will offer a wider choice to the consumer. When a monopoly takes over an industry, it becomes the sole supplier of a particular good or service in the market, meaning that there is no competition. This lack of competition generally leads to fewer options for consumers, as the monopolist has no incentive to diversify the products or services it offers. In a competitive market, firms are motivated to differentiate their products in order to attract customers, leading to a wider variety of choices for consumers. Analyzing the other options. Option A. A monopoly will earn a higher rate of profit. Is likely true. Monopolies can earn higher profits because they can set prices above the competitive level. Without competition, they can limit output and charge higher prices, maximizing their profits. Next, option B. A monopoly will gain a greater share of the market. Is also true. A monopoly, by definition, controls 100% of the market share, whereas competitive firms only control a portion of the market. Lastly, option D. A monopoly will operate on a larger scale of production. Can be true in some cases. Monopolies may benefit from economies of scale, meaning they can produce at a larger scale and lower average costs due to their size and market power. However, the scale of production depends on the nature of the industry. Moving to 20th question. A firm's aim is to become a monopoly supplier. Which policy is it most likely to use to eliminate competition? A. Adopt price reductions and advertising. B. Avoid diseconomies of scale. C. Maximize output and profit. D. Reduce financial barriers to entry. The correct answer for this question is option A. Adopt price reductions and advertising. When a firm aims to become a monopoly supplier, it typically seeks to eliminate competition and dominate the market. One effective way to do this is by using price reductions and advertising. By lowering prices, often below the market equilibrium, a firm can make it difficult for competitors to stay profitable and can drive them out of the market. At the same time, heavy advertising can build brand recognition and consumer loyalty, further diminishing the chances of new competitors entering the market. This strategy is known as predatory pricing in some cases, where the firm sacrifices short-term profits to eliminate rivals and eventually increase prices once competition is reduced. The other options are less directly linked to eliminating competition. Option B, avoid diseconomies of scale, pertains to managing internal inefficiencies as the firm grows, but it doesn't focus on eliminating competitors. Option C, maximize output and profit, is more of a general business objective, and option D, reduce financial barriers to entry, could actually make it easier for new competitors to enter, which is the opposite of what a firm aiming to become a monopoly would want. Moving to question 21. A government decides to sell the monopoly supply of gas to households to a private firm. How could the government protect the interests of households after selling a large company to the private sector? A. By excluding all competition from foreign companies. B. By imposing a tax on excess profits. C. By introducing a quota system for imports of gas. D. By removing price controls on gas. The correct answer for this question is option B, by imposing a tax on excess profits. When a government sells a monopoly, in this case, the gas supply, to a private firm, the firm might have the incentive to increase prices or reduce service quality in order to maximize profits. To prevent the firm from exploiting its monopoly power and taking advantage of consumers, the government can impose a tax on excess profits, also known as a windfall profits tax. This is a way to prevent the firm from charging excessively high prices or making too much profit at the expense of consumers. The other options are less effective or might not protect consumers in the long run. Option A, excluding foreign competition may limit market access and potentially lead to higher prices for consumers, as it removes the incentive for the private firm to compete. Next, option C. Introducing a quota system for imports of gas would likely restrict supply and could result in higher prices for households, not protect their interests. Lastly, option D, removing price controls on gas would likely allow the private firm to set prices higher, which might harm consumers, particularly if the firm is a monopolist with no competition. Thank you for watching this video. I hope the explanations of past paper questions and the reasoning behind the correct answers helped clarify some key concepts. If you found this video useful, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Topical Economics for more insightful lessons and exam tips. Your support is truly appreciated, and it encourages me to keep creating valuable content to help you succeed. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments, and I'll be happy to assist. Thanks again for being a part of the Topical Economics community.